There were two Americas, two lines for water, two entrances to the same movie theater, two benches in the same courtroom, one for the judge, the other at the back, reserved for the one who would be judged before even opening their mouth. For nearly a century, the promise of the Civil War remained trapped between the letter of the law and street custom. Slavery had been abolished, but the hierarchy that sustained it found other names, other forms, other laws. This is the story of 12 years that changed the United States, not by the decree of a king, nor by the will of a single man, but by the stubborn courage of ordinary people who decided that waiting had already been waited for too long. Topeka, Kansas. A 7-year-old girl named Linda Brown walks more than a mile every day to the school bus stop, passing, along the way, an all-white school just a few blocks from her home. Her father, Oliver Brown, tries to enroll her there. He is refused. State law allows, indeed requires, that schools be segregated by race as long as they are, in theory, equal. In practice, they never were. Black schools received less funding, used books, and dilapidated buildings. The doctrine had an elegant name, separate but equal, coined almost 60 years earlier in another Supreme Court case, Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896. If you're enjoying the stories on American Chronicles, take a second to subscribe and become part of this journey through the hidden chapters of American history. Every subscription helps bring more carefully researched stories, forgotten events, and powerful true accounts to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and which story you'd like us to uncover next. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's much more to discover. The Brown family sues the school district. The case joins 4 others from different states and goes up to the highest court in the country under a single name, Brown v.O. Board of Education of Topeka. Leading the case is Thurgood Marshall, an attorney for the NAACP, a man who had already won dozens of legal battles against segregation, one city at a time. He argues something simple and devastating. There is no equal when there is separate. Separation itself is inequality. On May 17, 1954, Chief Justice Earl Warren read the verdict. Unanimous, 9 votes to 0. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. The decision electrifies one part of the country and infuriates another. In the South, governors promise resistance. One of them even says that schools would close before mixing students. The law had changed, custom had not. And it is precisely in the distance between these two worlds, what the law allows and what society tolerates, that the entire next decade will be fought. Montgomery, Alabama, December 1st, 1955. It's late afternoon, and a 42-year-old seamstress is returning home after a long day of work. City law dictates that black passengers sit at the back of the bus and give up their seat if a white passenger needs it. Rosa Parks is sitting in the first row of the colored section, exactly where she should be. The driver asks her to stand up. She refuses. It wasn't an impulsive gesture. Rosa Parks had been the secretary of the local NAACP chapter for over a decade. She knew exactly what she was doing and what it would cost. She is arrested. And that same night, leaders of Montgomery's black community meet to decide on a response. The answer is a boycott. No black passenger would use Montgomery's buses, not a single day, until segregation on public transportation ended. To lead the movement, they chose a 26-year-old Baptist pastor, newly arrived in the city. His name? Martin Luther King Jr. Nobody imagined that night that that name would become synonymous with the entire struggle that was to come. The boycott lasts 381 days. 381 days in which tens of thousands of people walk kilometers, organize rides, face threats and violence, all to avoid giving up a single seat. The bus company loses most of its revenue. Economic pressure is compounded by legal pressure. The NAACP takes the case to federal court. On November 13, 1956, the Supreme Court declared segregation on Alabama buses unconstitutional. On December 21st, Rosa Parks boarded and sat wherever she wanted. Montgomery had proven something that would change the entire strategy of the movement: collective, peaceful and organized action could bring down an entire system. One bus, one city, one law at a time. Little Rock, Arkansas, September 1957. 3 years after the Supreme Court decision, the school district finally agrees to comply with the law and admit 9 black students to the previously all-white Central High School. They would become known as the Little Rock Nine. The oldest is 17 years old. The youngest is 14. Neither of them imagined that their simple walk to school would become international news. Governor Orville Faubus calls in the state's National Guard, not to protect the students, but to prevent them from entering. For 3 weeks, the 9 teenagers have faced a siege. On one side, armed soldiers. On the other, a crowd shouting threats from meters away. One of the photographs from that month went around the world. A 15-year-old girl, books in her arms, walking alone in front of a crowd shouting their hatred in broad daylight. The crisis reaches the White House. President Dwight Eisenhower, a 5-star general, a man who did not see himself as a social reformer, is forced to act. On September 24th, he federalized the Arkansas National Guard, taking it out of the governor's hands, and sent 1,000 U.S. Army paratroopers to escort 9 teenagers to their classroom. For the first time since Reconstruction, the federal government is using military force to enforce in practice the right of black children to sit at a school desk. The 9 enter the school, but victory comes at a daily cost. Insults, physical aggression, isolation. One of them is expelled months later, accused of reacting to a provocation. None of them emerge unscathed from that year. Little Rock taught the country an uncomfortable lesson. The law could change overnight. Hearts, however, could not. Greensboro, North Carolina, February 1st, 1960. 4 black college students enter a department store, sit at the snack counter, usually reserved only for white customers, and order coffee. They are ignored. They refuse to leave. They come back the next day, and the next, and the next. Within weeks, the gesture spread to dozens of cities in the South. Students trained in nonviolent disciplines sit on counters, in libraries, and at public swimming pools, and absorb, without retaliation, spit, punches, and cigarette butts on their skin. The tactic has a simple name: sit-in. Sitting inside. In just a few months, more than 70,000 people, mostly students, participate in sit-ins across the country. Hundreds are arrested. None react with violence. In 1961, a new group took on an even more dangerous challenge. The Freedom Riders boarded interstate buses to test, in practice, a federal law that already prohibited segregation on this type of transportation. In Anniston, Alabama, one of the buses is surrounded, stoned, and set on fire. The passengers narrowly escape the flames, only to be beaten outside by the waiting crowd. In Birmingham and Montgomery, other buses are met by gangs armed with iron bars, while the local police, by tacit agreement, later investigations would reveal, delay intervening. The images are circulating around the world, and the federal government once again is forced to act. Attorney General Robert Kennedy orders federal protection for the Freedom Riders and pushes for new regulations that finally impose real integration in interstate transportation. Each counter, each seat, each bus became a silent battlefield. And one by one, these small battlefields began to turn the map of an entire country upside down. Birmingham, Alabama, 1963. If Montgomery was the first major test of the movement, Birmingham would be the most violent. The city is, in practice, ruled by one man, Eugene "Bull" Connor, the chief of public safety, the ultimate symbol of armed segregationist resistance with police powers. Martin Luther King Jr. and his allies deliberately chose Birmingham, knowing that the reaction there would be brutal and that this brutality, exposed to the cameras, could change the opinion of the entire country. Connor orders the police to use police dogs and high-pressure fire hoses against protesters, many of them children and teenagers participating in the Children's Crusade. The force of the water was enough to tear the bark off a tree, and it was pointed at the chests of 12 and 13-year-old children. The photographs spread around the world in a matter of hours. Newspapers in Europe, Asia, and Latin America featured the scene on their front pages. For the first time, the entire world observed in real time what American segregation truly meant in practice. Imprisoned during the protests, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in the margins of a newspaper and on scraps of smuggled paper one of the most important texts of the movement, the letter from Birmingham jail. Justice delayed anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Months later, on August 28, 1963, more than 250,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the largest peaceful demonstration ever seen in the American capital up to that point. From atop the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, Martin Luther King Jr. delivers a 17-minute speech. He improvises the final minutes, abandoning his written text to speak directly from his feelings. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. On that day, a speech became a landmark not only for the movement, but for the English language. And the world came to forever associate the fight for civil rights with a single phrase, I have a dream. On July 2, 1964, less than a year after the March on Washington, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, the most comprehensive law against racial discrimination in the nation's history, prohibiting segregation in public places and discrimination in employment. But one fundamental achievement was still missing: the right to vote. In many southern states, arbitrary literacy tests, poll taxes, and outright intimidation kept the overwhelming majority of black voters away from the polls. Selma, Alabama, becomes the new epicenter of the struggle. Only 2% of the city's black voters were able to register to vote. On March 7, 1965, a group of approximately 600 protesters began a peaceful march from Selma to the state capital, Montgomery, 80 kilometers on foot, to demand the right to vote. They don't get far. Upon crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, on the outskirts of the city, they encounter a barrier of mounted state police armed with batons and tear gas. The order is given and the cavalry advances on the unarmed crowd. Protesters are beaten, trampled, some lose consciousness on the asphalt. Among the wounded was a 25-year-old student leader, John Lewis, with a fractured skull from a blow with a baton. He would continue the fight for decades, and decades later become a United States congressman. Images of police attacking peaceful and unarmed protesters were broadcast that same night to millions of American homes. The day went down in history with one name: Bloody Sunday. Days later, under federal protection ordered by President Johnson himself, thousands resumed the march, and this time they reached Montgomery. And we will win. On August 6, 1965, Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, eliminating discriminatory barriers to voter registration nationwide. In less than a year, the number of registered black voters in the South more than doubles. The bridge that witnessed blood and violence becomes, decades later, a monument and a symbol of crossing over, not just geographically, but historically. Memphis, Tennessee, April 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. is in the city to support a strike by sanitation workers, almost all of them black, demanding decent wages and basic safety conditions after two colleagues were crushed to death by faulty equipment. On the evening of April 3rd, he gives a speech to an audience in a local church. It is his last speech. I've been to the mountaintop, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will reach the promised land. The following day, April 4th, 1968, around 6 p.m., King is on the second-floor balcony of the Lorraine Motel, talking with colleagues in the parking lot below. A single shot is fired from a nearby building. Martin Luther King Jr. is 39 years old. The news spreads in minutes. In more than 100 American cities, grief explodes into revolt. Entire neighborhoods burn that same night, the pain of a community that saw, once again, one of its most peaceful leaders brought down by the violence he himself refused to use. His funeral in Atlanta drew over 100,000 people. At the family's request, his coffin was carried on a simple cart pulled by mules, not for luxury, but as a reminder. Until the end, his fight had also been for the poorest of the poor. 12 years, from a bus seat in Montgomery to a motel balcony in Memphis. In that time, a country was forced to look in the mirror and, albeit incompletely, painfully, and unfinished, to change what it saw. The laws that the decade achieved, the end of legal segregation, the right to vote, remain in effect today. But King himself, in his final months, warned that equality before the law was not enough as long as poverty and economic inequality continued to separate. In practice, the same two countries he had spent his life trying to unite. The dream didn't end on that balcony in Memphis. It merely changed hands, passed down, generation after generation, to those who still believe that the distance between the world as it is and the world as it should be can, with courage and persistence, be traversed on foot.